Shedeur Sanders and Pat McAfee is going viral from yesterday at the ESPY. Shedeur Sanders fit right in with the superstars and everybody who was there. And they were showing my dog some love. Everywhere Shedeur Sanders went, shoot, everybody hugging, dapping him up. The Cleveland media really don't like it because Shedeur Sanders got his own brand. He got his own brand. Shedeur Sanders don't need no NFL.
One night at the ESPYs, in a room full of legends, Shedeur Sanders walked through the crowd and something happened that nobody expected. Pat McAfee couldn't ignore it. Cameras couldn't ignore it. And by morning, half the internet was arguing about a kid who hadn't even started a single NFL game yet. That's the thing about Shedeur Sanders. He doesn't need a stat sheet to make noise. He just needs a room. This is the story of a quarterback who keeps getting louder without raising his voice in a football city that's about to find out exactly what it signed up for. Let's go back to that night first, because it matters. The ESPYs aren't a football event. They're a mixing bowl. NBA champions, Olympic sprinters, Grand Slam winners, all in one building, all watching each other as much as they're watching the show. And in the middle of it, Shedeur Sanders wasn't hiding in a corner waiting to be noticed. He was moving through the room like he belonged there. Handshakes, hugs, easy conversation with players who've won championships he hasn't even sniffed yet. Pat McAfee saw it, and Pat McAfee, a guy who has interviewed everybody from MVPs to Super Bowl champions, came away from that night saying something that stuck. This kid is big time. Not has potential, not one day, big time, right now. And that's exactly the problem, depending on who you ask, because here's where the tension starts. Shedeur Sanders hasn't started a full NFL season. He hasn't thrown for 3,000 yards in the league. By the cold, hard measuring stick the NFL usually uses, he hasn't earned the room he was just standing in. And there's a certain type of football media that cannot stand watching a rookie carry himself like a star before the box score says he is one.
Those are some of the clips from the ESPY of Pat McAfee and Shedeur Sanders. Shedeur Sanders is big time, and he just won't be the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Can you imagine if Shedeur Sanders is named starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns for Game 1 this year, and he play all 17 games, and they make the playoff? Man, they're going to have to build a statue at that new stadium with Shedeur Sanders out there.
You've heard the criticism already, probably more than once. Too much confidence, too much branding, too much attention for a guy who's thrown fewer regular season NFL passes than some backups have thrown in a single game. The narrative writes itself for people who want it to. Flashy kid, famous father, hasn't paid his dues. But flip it around and a different story starts to take shape. Because this isn't a kid who stumbled into the spotlight. This is a kid who was built for it, on purpose, by someone who knew exactly what NFL life does to young quarterbacks who aren't ready for the attention. Deion Sanders didn't just teach his son how to read a defense, he taught him how to survive being watched, how to smile when people want you to flinch, how to turn a hostile press conference into a highlight instead of a headline about how you cracked under pressure. That's not something you learn from a playbook, that's something you learn by growing up inside the fire. So when people say Shedeur Sanders acts like he's already made it, maybe that's not arrogance. Maybe that's just a guy who was raised to never look rattled, even when the whole building is watching to see if he will be. And here's where the doubt really lives, the part nobody wants to say directly on camera. Is Shedeur Sanders actually good enough to be a starting NFL quarterback, or is he just good at being famous? That question follows him into every single conversation about the Cleveland Browns quarterback room. Because make no mistake, that room is loaded, and it is not friendly. Deshaun Watson is still there, a former MVP-level talent trying to rebuild trust after years of turbulence. There's competition at every level of that depth chart. This isn't a situation where Shedeur gets handed a job because his dad is famous or because he goes viral at award shows. If anything, it's the opposite. Every mistake gets magnified. Every incompletion becomes a headline. Every good throw gets treated like an accident until he proves otherwise.
Listen, Shedeur Sanders warned y'all, if I get some off-season training camp time, it gonna get dangerous. That boy talking that trash, man. Look here. The Cleveland Browns is set up pretty. They don't revamp the offensive line. They got better wide receivers. Casey Concepcion, Denzel Boston, and they got a second-year wide receiver, Isaiah Bond, and the tight end Harold Fanning coming back.
So how does he handle that kind of daily pressure? This is where it gets interesting, because the people who are actually around him every day tell a very different story than the ones watching from a studio desk. Jared Verse, a defensive player who's been through Browns camp watching this quarterback battle unfold in real time, didn't hand out empty praise when asked about it. He talked about two guys putting in real work. He talked about Deshaun Watson still carrying that presence of a guy who's done this a long time. And then he talked about Shedeur. And the word he kept circling back to wasn't talent, it was confidence. The kind of confidence, he said, where you watch a throw develop and think it's about to go wrong, and somehow it doesn't. Somehow he connects it anyway. That's not something a coach can install in a quarterback overnight. That's either in you or it isn't. And it's not just one voice. Around the building, the same theme keeps surfacing from people who don't owe Shedeur Sanders anything. Teammates who see him grinding through a camp that doesn't care about ESPY's red carpets or social media trends. In that building, the only currency that matters is whether you can move the ball when the lights are real. And by every account coming out of Cleveland, he's doing exactly that. Here's a moment that gets buried under all the noise. Last season, when Shedeur got thrown into an actual NFL game against Baltimore, he didn't get the storybook ending, but he also didn't disappear. He took his shots, he got back up, and afterward, instead of hiding from the moment, he leaned into it. He basically told everybody watching, give me an off-season, give me real training camp reps, and this is going to look different. That wasn't bragging for the cameras, that was a promise. And promises like that either age like fine wine or turn into ammunition for your critics forever. So, which one is it going to be?
And they make the playoff, man, they're going to have to build a statue at that new stadium with Shedeur Sanders out there. They out there worried about LeBron coming to Cleveland. Nah, the talk should be Shedeur Sanders is going to be starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. Boy, you really gotta go. Hey, Shedeur Sanders is big time. He's big time. Shedeur Sanders gave you a glimpse last year.
Because the roster around him this year doesn't look like a team quietly hoping their rookie fails so they can move on. It looks like a franchise that upgraded around whoever wins that quarterback job. Better offensive line depth, a receiving room that added real juice, a tight end who's healthy and ready to be a security blanket over the middle. If Shedeur Sanders ends up under center for 16 or 17 games this season, he is not walking into a bare cupboard. He's walking into a roster that was built to let a young quarterback breathe. And that changes the whole conversation. Because if this offense clicks, even a little, the story stops being, can Shedeur Sanders handle the NFL? And starts being, how far can this thing go? There's a phrase that keeps floating around Cleveland this offseason, and it's not really about the quarterback at all. It's about the defense. Because here's the truth nobody wants to admit when they're arguing about Shedeur Sanders on Twitter. Championship runs aren't won by a quarterback putting on a highlight reel every Sunday. They're won by defenses that don't need him to be perfect. The Browns don't need a top 5 unit on that side of the ball this year. They need something steadier, a defense that just holds the line, gets off the field on third down, and keeps games close enough for their offense to finish the job late. If that defense lands somewhere in the middle of the pack instead of the bottom, and Shedeur Sanders is even serviceable as a game manager who occasionally makes the spectacular play, Cleveland isn't just competitive, they're a real playoff contender. That's not hype talk, that's just math. Now zoom back out to that ESPYs night one more time, because it tells you something bigger about who this kid is becoming in real time. He wasn't there begging for validation. Athletes who've already won championships were the ones pulling him into conversations, into photos, into their circle. That doesn't happen by accident, and it doesn't happen to guys the league secretly views as pretenders. There's a version of this story where Shedeur Sanders is just a famous last name riding hype into a league that eventually humbles him. And then there's the version where a kid who was raised inside pressure his entire life finally gets an offense built to let him succeed, gets a defense good enough to buy him time, and turns every single "he's not ready" headline into fuel.
Your wide receiver, Isaiah Bond, and the tight end Harold Fanning coming back. And it looks like they gonna be healthy. I'm telling y'all right now, the haters, the Cleveland media, get ready. Because Shedeur Sanders, big time. He finna put on a show this year. He box office. He's box office. This dude all over social media. They can't stop him. They can't stop it.
We don't know yet which version we're watching. Nobody does. Not the media, not the fans arguing online, not even the people inside that Cleveland building who are still watching this quarterback competition play out rep by rep. But here's what we do know. This is a kid who doesn't flinch in rooms most rookies would freeze in. This is a kid teammates are already vouching for behind closed doors, away from the cameras, when there's nothing to gain from lying. And this is a kid who told you himself, out loud, on camera, "Give me the reps, and it's going to get dangerous." If you've been following this story from the draft night doubts all the way to this ESPYs moment, you already know this isn't just a football story anymore. It's a story about proving people wrong in real time in front of everybody. So if you want to be here when the next chapter drops, because trust me, there's a lot more coming, go ahead and hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss a single piece of it. Because one thing is becoming impossible to ignore, whether people want to admit it or not, whether the doubters keep doubting or not. Shedeur Sanders is not waiting for permission to be a star. He's already acting like one. The only question left is whether the league is finally ready to admit it too. And knowing how this kid has handled every single obstacle put in front of him so far, don't bet against him proving it on the field the exact same way he's already proving it everywhere else.